So picture this. You step off the plane in New York or, London, Sydney, wherever.
Right, the ultimate destination you've been dreaming about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have spent years preparing for this exact moment. I mean, you've memorized the vocabulary flashcards. You've mastered those really complex grammar structures.
Ace all the written exams.
Totally. You aced them. So you confidently walk up to a barista ready to order a coffee. The environment feels totally manageable, right?
Sure, it's just a coffee shop.
But then the native speaker behind the counter opens their mouth. And suddenly, all that preparation just evaporates. You feel like you are standing on a train platform watching a high-speed bullet train just blow past you.
Oh, that is such a perfect way to describe it.
It's just this chaotic, aggressive blur of sound.
Yeah.
Before your brain can process even a single solitary word, that conversation is already like a mile down the track.
Yeah, and you're just left standing there.
Panicked, wondering if they're even speaking the language you spent half your life studying.
It is a visceral, almost physical shock to the system. The linguistic ground just completely falls out from under you.
It really does.
And what you're describing is essentially the definition of acute cognitive overload. You are experiencing this massive influx of auditory data that your brain's processing centers simply cannot parse in real time.
And if you are listening to this right now, you know the incredibly frustrating feeling. It is a universal rite of passage for anyone learning a language.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone goes through it.
And that specific overwhelming sensation is exactly what we are going to dismantle today. We're doing a deep dive into the hidden matrix of high-speed native English.
I love that. The hidden matrix.
Right. We're using this highly practical transcript from a session called the Advanced Learning Lab. It's hosted by two language educators, Emma and David. Their entire focus is fiercely dedicated to just one mission.
Which is how to actually decode and understand fast native English speakers.
Exactly. So what stands out immediately to you in their approach? Because it's not the usual stuff.
Well, what stands out is their total refusal to just hand you another stack of vocabulary flashcards.
Thank goodness.
Right. The textbook approach is fundamentally what sets you up for that train platform panic in the first place. Instead, Emma and David dissect the mechanics of how native English actually operates in the wild.
In the wild, yeah. It's messy out there.
Very. They're looking at the acoustics, the psychology, and the physical reality of human speech.
So if you're joining us for this deep dive, the goal today isn't to pile on more rigid grammar rules. We want to take you behind the curtain, train your ears, and give you highly actionable daily exercises to break that speed barrier once and for all.
We're basically going to explore the cognitive science of language acquisition.
And look at the wonderfully messy, chaotic way that human beings actually communicate.
Messy is definitely the perfect starting point here. Because to understand why native speakers sound so aggressively fast, we have to start by completely shattering a fundamental illusion.
Which Emma calls stepping out of the textbook and into real life.
Exactly. It's what we can refer to as the translation trap.
The translation trap. Because right out of the gate in this source material, there's a really bold claim. They argue that in real life, words are routinely skipped. Entire sentences run together into a single block of sound.
Yeah, and if you try translating what you hear word for word, you are mathematically guaranteed to be left hopelessly behind.
But it's not just about the raw words per minute rate, is it? Like, they aren't just talking faster.
No, not at all. It's about the cognitive architecture you are trying to use to process that speed.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Let's look at the actual neuroscience of what is happening in your brain when you fall into that translation trap. In a traditional language classroom, you're trained to operate via an incredibly inefficient pathway.
Like a really bad software program.
Exactly. You are taught to hear an English acoustic signal, pause the input, search your long-term memory for the semantic meaning, map that meaning to the equivalent word in your native language, lock in the concept,
and only then return to the auditory stream for the next word.
Right, which feels completely logical and safe when you are sitting in a quiet room reading a book at your own pace. You control the flow of time.
But in live, spontaneous spoken language, attempting that process is a neurological disaster.
A total disaster. Translating requires intense, active processing power in your working memory. And working memory is notoriously limited.
It's tiny.
It really is. If a native speaker says a 10-word sentence and you physically stop your auditory processing to translate word number one,
the speaker does not pause.
Right. The acoustic wave continues. By the time your brain has successfully routed that first word through your native language mapping system, the speaker isn't on word number 2.
They're already on word number 5 or 6.
Exactly. You are quite literally living in the past.
It reminds me so much of trying to stream a high-definition 4K video on a really terrible legacy internet connection, like old dial-up.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
The data, the ones and zeros, they are technically all arriving at the modem. The information is there. But the computer's processor, or the bandwidth, just cannot render that massive amount of data into a picture in real time.
Right. The processor gets overwhelmed.
So you just get that stuttering, freezing, buffering wheel of death on your screen. That has to be exactly what is happening in the auditory cortex. The sound is physically vibrating your eardrum, but the internal translation processor is buffering.
That analogy tracks perfectly with cognitive load theory, and the biological buffer in your brain gets full incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Very fast. When you are stuck processing word number 1, words 2, 3, and 4 are sitting in what we call the echoic memory.
Echoic memory?
Yeah, it's a very short-term auditory storage that only lasts for a couple of seconds, like an echo.
Oh, right.
If your working memory doesn't grab those sounds and process them before that window closes, the brain simply flushes them out to make room for incoming acoustic data.
They just get deleted.
Gone forever. So you end up with these massive, terrifying gaps in comprehension. You hear the first word and maybe the last word, and everything in between is just a blur.
And according to David in the lab transcript, this buffering phenomenon is entirely a manufactured symptom of how we are taught.
Yes, traditional language classes prioritize isolated, sterile vocabulary.
They teach you how a word sounds in a vacuum, a pristine laboratory setting.
Which completely ignores the messy physical reality of how words behave when they violently bump up against each other in the human mouth.
Textbooks teach a version of English that simply does not exist in nature.
They teach orthography, how things are spelled.
Right.
But human beings don't speak in spelling. We speak in continuous streams of expelled air and vibrating vocal cords.
Which leads to a crucial pivot in how we understand the problem. If the core issue isn't just that native speakers are talking at a higher RPM, if the problem is that they are physically speaking a different version of the language.
What exactly are they doing to these words?
Yeah, because I look at some of these transcripts and honestly, it looks like they're just mangling the language they invented.
Well, to a purist who believes the written word is the true form of language, it definitely sounds like mangling.
So what are they actually doing?
They are following the laws of physics and biology. They are following the natural flow of human speech. Emma and David highlight that native speakers rely heavily on rhythm.
Right.
They use contractions, they actively link consonant sounds to vowel sounds, and they aggressively squish syllables into one another.
Let's pull some of the stark examples they gave in the source material, because they really illustrate that gap between the laboratory and the real world.
Let's hear them.
So the textbook says, "What are you doing?" Every syllable is distinct, but the native speaker actually says, "What you doing?"
Right. 3 distinct, isolated grammatical units are compressed into 2 phonetic units.
Or the textbook dictates, "I'm going to," but out on the street you hear, "I'm going."
Classic example.
Then there's the classic, "Did you eat already?" which somehow magically transforms into, "Did you eat already?"
Did ya? Yeah.
And my absolute favorite, which combines all of this beautiful chaos into one string, "What are you going to do?" transforms into, "What you going to do?"
What you gonna do? The entire structural integrity of the original sentence is transformed.
Okay, I have to push back on this for a second. If you're listening to this and you've spent hours memorizing the spelling of "going to," you might be thinking, are native speakers just profoundly lazy?
It's a common thought.
Right. Why do they invent all these beautiful, distinct words, write massive dictionaries to codify them, only to blur them into a sloppy auditory mess the second they open their mouths?
It is a completely valid frustration, and historically, even some prescriptivist grammarians shared that exact sentiment.
So they were mad about it too.
Oh, very. But what we're looking at isn't laziness. It is a deeply ingrained biological principle called acoustic efficiency.
Acoustic efficiency.
And in linguistics, this specific phenomenon is referred to as connected speech.
Connected speech. It sounds almost elegant when you call it that.
It is incredibly elegant when you view it through the lens of anatomy. Think about the physical mechanics of the human vocal tract.
Okay, visualizing the mouth.
To clearly and distinctly articulate what are you doing, you have to start and stop the airflow from your lungs multiple times. Your tongue has to strike the alveolar ridge behind your teeth for the hard T,
which takes effort.
then physically pull back and change shape for the R sound and reposition entirely for the Y. It is a tremendous amount of muscular micromanagement.
It requires immense physical work.
And more importantly, it interrupts the rhythmic flow of breath. Connected speech is simply the brain and the articulatory system working in tandem to find the path of least physical resistance.
So it's essentially an evolutionary energy-saving mechanism.
Very much so. It relates to Zipf's law of least effort in human behavior. Dropped letters and blended sounds create a much smoother, uninterrupted conversational rhythm.
Like taking a shortcut through a park instead of walking all the way around the block.
Exactly. When the hard D sound in did meets the palatal Y sound in you, the mouth finds it incredibly inefficient to pronounce them separately.
Indeed.
Right. It's clunky. So through a process called assimilation, it blends them into an entirely new sound. A J or J sound, didja.
Wow.
It takes less muscular effort, it requires fewer micro movements of the tongue, and it allows the expiratory breath to flow continuously.
That makes total sense from a physics perspective.
Oh?
You are streamlining the machinery, but for you, the language learner, this biological streamlining creates a massive catastrophic blind spot.
Huge.
Because as Emma points out in the source, even if you know the vocabulary perfectly, even if you've aced every written test on the individual words did, you, and eat, your brain simply will not recognize the squished, assimilated version, dija.
No, it won't.
Not without specific targeted awareness and exposure.
Because your brain's auditory processing center is actively scanning its internal database for 3 separate, distinct phonetic files. And the native speaker just handed your brain one totally unrecognizable blended file. Your brain rejects the file because it doesn't match the textbook template it was given.
It's like having a computer program designed to read only PDF files, and someone keeps sending you JPEG images.
Perfect analogy.
The information is there, but you lack the software to open it. So if we accept this reality, that connected speech isn't a mistake, but rather the acoustic efficiency of the human mouth creating messy, blended words, the massive question is, how do we install the right software?
Right. How do we fix it?
How do we fix the buffering problem and actually train our brains to decode this messy English in real time?
This is where Emma and David pivot from linguistic theory into highly practical ear training.
Finally, some solutions.
They lay out specific daily exercises designed to bridge this exact anatomical and cognitive gap. And the first, arguably most powerful technique they recommend is called shadowing, followed closely by a practice they call the 1-minute rewind.
I want to dive really deep into shadowing first, because the methodology they outline isn't just about passive listening. It's highly active.
Very active.
They instruct the learner to take a short video, maybe a YouTube clip, a vlog, or scenes from a movie. Step 1 is to just listen to it once without subtitles to grasp the overarching context.
Get the gist of it.
Right. Step 2 is where the magic happens. You turn the subtitles on, pause the video after every single sentence, and then you repeat the sentence out loud exactly how it sounds.
Not how it's written in the pristine subtitles.
Exactly, but how the native speaker actually pronounced it in their messy reality.
The operative word in that entire sequence is exactly. You are mimicking the tone, the speed, the pitch, and the emotion.
Mimicking everything.
If the speaker drops a T, you drop the T. If they squish 3 words into one unrecognizable blob, you produce that exact same blob.
I want to hypothesize about why this works because it feels kind of counterintuitive. If my problem is listening, why is the solution speaking?
It's a great question.
Why is that physical mimicry so vital? Couldn't I just listen to the audio file 50 times until I recognize the pattern?
You could listen 50 times, but it would take exponentially longer to achieve the same result.
Really?
Yeah. If we look at the neurology behind what you just asked, reading and passive listening rely on entirely different neural pathways than active speech production.
Okay, break that down.
When you read, your visual cortex is doing the heavy lifting. When you passively listen, your auditory cortex is engaged, but it's largely a receptive process.
Just taking it in.
Exactly. However, to truly understand spontaneous spoken language rapidly, you need to engage the motor theory of speech perception.
The motor theory of speech perception. That sounds intense. What is that?
It's a hypothesis in cognitive science that suggests people perceive spoken words by internally recreating the articulatory gestures, the physical mouth movements required to make those sounds.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In other words, to truly hear a sound, your brain subtly simulates what it would feel like to physically produce it.
That is wild.
Shadowing forces a physiological connection between your auditory cortex and your motor cortex. By forcing your own mouth, tongue, and vocal cords to physically mimic a native speaker, you are essentially reverse engineering the connected speech.
Oh, I get it now.
You are developing proprioception, an internal awareness of how those messy sounds are physically constructed.
So it's literally building muscle memory for your ears.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are training your brain to process real-time sounds by forcing your own anatomy to experience the physical shortcuts of acoustic efficiency.
That makes me think of trying to learn a really complex, fast-paced physical dance routine.
Like a tango or something?
Exactly. You can't just sit in a chair, read a piece of paper that lists the choreography steps, and expect to walk out onto a dance floor and flawlessly execute a tango.
You'd fall flat on your face.
Right. Your brain might know the steps conceptually, but your body doesn't know the physics of it. You have to physically stand up and mimic the instructor's exact movements over and over. You step on your own toes, you miss the beat, you stumble.
But
Eventually, the motor cortex maps the movements. Muscle memory takes over, and your body just knows the rhythm without conscious thought. Shadowing is quite literally choreography for your mouth.
that is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. You are teaching your articulatory system the physical dance of native English.
I love that.
You are moving from declarative knowledge, knowing that a rule exists, to procedural knowledge, knowing how to physically execute and recognize the pattern.
Okay, so that's shadowing. What about the other?
And the second exercise they recommend, the 1-minute rewind, complements this physical choreography by aggressively isolating and strengthening the auditory focus component.
The 1-minute rewind. The mechanics here are equally specific. The method is to watch a 1-minute video of native speakers, again, entirely without subtitles. You hit play and then you rewind it, choosing just one single sentence to hyperfocus on.
Just one.
Your mission is to catch every single word in that specific sentence. If you miss a word, which you likely will, you don't move on. You rewind, pause, listen again, and repeat it out loud. You loop that single sentence until the acoustic fog lifts.
And David emphasizes that committing to this for just 1 minute a day, consistently over a month, builds what he refers to as listening muscles.
I appreciate that framing because it makes a monolithic task feel incredibly manageable. I mean, 1 minute is nothing. It's the time it takes to brush your teeth.
Exactly. It removes the excuse of not having time.
But I want to advocate for the frustrated learner here for a second. What if you keep rewinding like 5, 10, 15 times and you still cannot physically parse the sound?
It happens.
It just sounds like a vowel soup. I know learners who would find that loop incredibly demoralizing. They feel like their ears are broken.
The source material addresses this brilliantly by establishing a framework of psychological safety.
Psychological safety.
Davey explicitly reminds the audience that the goal of this exercise is progress, not perfection. He points out a reality that learners often forget. Even native speakers frequently mishear things in their own language.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly validating.
If you think about your daily life in your native language, how often do you say, "Sorry, what was that?" Or, "Could you repeat that?"
All the time. Constantly.
Right. We do not live in perfect acoustic environments. There is ambient noise, traffic, people mumble, people turn their heads away while speaking.
They talk with food in their mouths.
Exactly. The human brain is constantly dealing with degraded audio signals. The goal of the 1-minute rewind isn't to achieve 100% flawless phonetic transcription on the first pass.
So what is the goal?
The deeper psychological goal is to condition your autonomic nervous system to stop panicking when it encounters ambiguity.
To stop the acoustic startle response.
Exactly. When you miss a word, your amygdala often triggers a mild stress response. You panic, you focus on the missed word, and consequently, you miss the next 10 words.
Because your brain is still stuck on the mistake.
By repeatedly rewinding and engaging with the ambiguity in a safe, low-stakes environment, you are building ambiguity tolerance.
Ambiguity tolerance.
You are training your brain to stay calm, parse the continuous stream of sound more effectively, and accept that missing a syllable doesn't mean the entire conversation is lost.
So, shadowing helps us physically map the mechanics of the sounds, and the 1-minute rewind builds our neurological focus and our tolerance for ambiguity.
Oh, exactly.
But even with those two powerful tools, there is still a massive elephant in the room that we have to address.
Yeah.
Because shadowing helps decode the words that are squished together. But what about the invisible words?
Yes.
The words that seem to disappear entirely from the acoustic record.
The disappearing words. This takes us out of basic ear training and into the realm of advanced decoding.
Advanced decoding. I like the sound of that.
The physical reality of English is that certain functional words are frequently swallowed whole by the surrounding vocabulary. Emma and David offer two vital strategies to combat this phenomenon: dictation practice and a cognitive framework called chunking.
Let's unpack dictation first. In the Advanced Learning Lab, the protocol is rigorous. You listen to a short, natural audio clip, and your task is to write down exactly, letter for letter, what you hear.
Everything you hear.
You play the clip 2 or 3 times, doing your best to fill in the blanks, and only after you have committed your guess to paper do you allow yourself to check the actual subtitles.
Which is nerve-wracking, but necessary.
And Emma gives this brilliant, lightning-fast example. She says, "I should have told you earlier."
I should have told you earlier, a highly common everyday phrase.
And David immediately points out that almost 0 native speakers on a casual Tuesday will clearly enunciate that sentence as, "I should have told you."
Almost never.
The word have simply vanishes from existence. It gets totally absorbed, swallowed up by should, creating shoulda.
This specific example perfectly isolates why dictation is such a crucial diagnostic tool.
How so?
When you are forced to write down the phonetic reality of what you heard, dictation forces you into a state of cognitive dissonance. You are forced to confront the very uncomfortable gap between what your brain expects to hear based on years of textbook grammar drills and what is actually delivered by the acoustic reality of the speaker.
It essentially makes the invisible words visible on the page.
Yeah.
It highlights your own blind spots.
Yes. Let's look at the psychology of that moment. When you look down at your notepad and see that you've written, "I should told you," your brain's left hemisphere, the logic and grammar center, immediately flags an error.
It's like a red squiggly line in a word processor.
Exactly. It knows the grammatical formula is flawed. It knows there must be a have or an auxiliary verb in that space, but your auditory cortex is insisting that it simply didn't hear it. Dictation bridges that gap. It connects your top-down grammatical expectation with the bottom-up acoustic reality. It trains your brain to realize that in real-world, high-speed English, the word have does not sound like an aspirated H followed by an A, followed by a fricative V.
It sounds like a tiny, almost imperceptible sound grafted onto the end of the previous word.
Precisely. It becomes a schwa sound. And once you visually see that mapping on paper, once you connect the grammar rule to the acoustic shortcut, your ear knows exactly what phonetic signature to listen for the next time someone uses a perfect modal verb.
And that realization leads us perfectly into the second advanced technique they discuss, which fundamentally changes how we view vocabulary, and that is chunking.
Chunking is a game changer.
Emma explains that native speakers do not conceptualize their speech word by word. They speak in prefabricated groups of words, chunks.
Right.
So the phrase, "how are you?" does not exist as 3 separate linguistic units in the native speaker's mind. Your brain needs to process it as one single unbroken block of sound. How are you?
How are you? It functions as a single lexical item. And structurally speaking, this is how the human brain strongly prefers to store and retrieve information.
Why is that?
Working memory, as we discussed earlier, is severely bottlenecked. George Miller's famous cognitive psychology paper from the 1950s suggested we can only hold about 7 ± 2 items in our working memory at once.
I find this concept of chunking so incredibly liberating for a learner who feels overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely.
If you think about the heavy mental load you are forcing yourself to carry when you treat how, are, and you as 3 distinct objects.
It's exhausting.
It's way too much.
You have to translate 3 separate dictionary definitions. You have to analyze their complex grammatical relationship to each other, determine the tense, and then hold all of that abstract data in your working memory while the speaker is already moving on to their next sentence.
You are maxing out your cognitive RAM on a basic greeting. But if you treat "how are you" as a single chunk, if you view it as one single multi-syllable vocabulary item that simply means a friendly greeting, you only occupy 1 slot in your working memory.
Exactly. 1 slot instead of 3.
It's the difference between trying to carry 50 loose, awkward items in your arms, dropping them everywhere, versus throwing all 50 items into one sturdy suitcase with a handle. The weight is the same, but the cognitive load required to carry it is drastically reduced.
That is the essence of lexical chunking. You transition from analyzing the microscopic grammar of every syllable to recognizing macro patterns of meaning. You stop being an auditor of grammar and start being a consumer of meaning.
But this brings up a rather massive logistical problem that we have to solve.
Okay, what is it?
If we are successfully chunking these words together into these big, fast blocks of sound, these suitcases, how do we actually unpack the meaning of those suitcases without stopping to translate them in our head? Because we already established in section 1 that the translation trap is the cardinal sin that makes us fall behind in the first place. If I'm translating chunks instead of words, I'm still translating, which means I'm still buffering.
That is the ultimate paradox of language learning. How do you understand something without translating it into the language you already know?
Exactly.
How do you do that?
This is where Emma and David introduce what I consider to be one of the most profound psychological tools in this entire deep dive. They call it the listen and imagine method.
Listen and imagine.
And the core foundational instruction is this: do not analyze the grammar. Do not translate the words. Instead, actively create mental pictures. You bypass the linguistic translation process entirely via visualization.
This is where the cognitive science gets incredibly fascinating. They provide 2 fantastic, highly visual examples in the lab. First, David throws out the sentence, "We grab some coffee and headed downtown."
The explicit instruction to the learner isn't to figure out the past tense conjugation of the verb to grab. The instruction is to instantly conjure a mental image of 2 friends walking into a bustling city with paper coffee cups in their hands.
And the second example Emma uses is even more dynamic, more cinematic. She says, she ran out of the house, jumped into the car, and drove off without saying a word.
And immediately after saying it, Emma asks the listener, "Did you see it?" The goal was to trigger a movie in your mind. You didn't need to translate every single syllable or parse the prepositions. You just watched the scene unfold.
If we look at the evolutionary biology of why this specific technique is so remarkably effective, it reveals a massive shortcut for fast listening.
Really? How so?
The human brain's architecture is not democratic. It heavily prioritizes vision. Visual processing in the occipital lobe is vastly, exponentially faster than linguistic translation in the neocortex.
When you say vastly faster, how are we quantifying that? Like on a neurological, evolutionary level?
Let's trace the evolutionary timeline. Humans and our mammalian ancestors have been processing complex, high-stakes visual scenes, identifying predators in the brush, navigating treacherous landscapes, tracking the trajectory of a thrown spear for tens of millions of years.
So we're built for that.
Exactly. Our brains are incredibly highly evolved supercomputers when it comes to rendering spatial and visual data almost instantaneously.
And language.
By contrast, complex symbolic spoken language, and especially the highly unnatural task of translating between 2 abstract symbolic language systems, is a very, very recent evolutionary development.
It's like a new app.
It's essentially a software patch installed late in our biological history. It is clunky, it requires massive metabolic energy, and it is slow.
So by converting the English acoustic sounds directly into mental imagery, you are essentially bypassing the sluggish modern translation middleman completely.
Yes.
You are routing the data away from the slow linguistic centers and feeding it directly into the ancient lightning-fast visual cortex.
That is exactly the mechanism. This aligns with dual coding theory in psychology, which suggests that forming mental images aids in learning and accelerates recall because you are utilizing parallel processing streams.
I absolutely love that concept. Bypassing the translation middleman. It makes me think of the difference between reading a highly dense technical script of a high-octane action movie versus just sitting back in a dark theater and watching the movie play out on the big screen.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
When you watch a movie, you aren't consciously translating the individual pixels of light on the screen into words in your head. You aren't analyzing the director's camera angles. You're just effortlessly experiencing the narrative flow of the story.
Right.
That's what the listen and imagine method does for language comprehension. It turns a dense script into an immersive experience.
It allows you to actually keep pace with the speeding train on the platform, because the flow of mental images can move just as quickly as the native speaker's continuous stream of connected speech.
Okay, so we are fundamentally restructuring how we process language. We are chunking words into suitcases of meaning, and we are turning abstract sounds into vivid mental movies to bypass translation.
It's a total paradigm shift
that covers the vocabulary, the grammar, and the imagery. But human communication isn't just a sterile exchange of dictionary definitions, right? What about the massive amount of information that is completely hidden in how someone speaks, or the environment where they are speaking?
The unspoken stuff.
Right, because Emma and David's source material goes far beyond just decoding the words themselves.
It does. It moves into the realm of pragmatics and metadata, the unspoken clues that surround the language.
Like what?
And the Advanced Learning Lab highlights 3 specific, highly leverageable areas here: active listening for emotional prosody, utilizing environmental context, and deliberately exposing yourself to regional accents.
Let's start with emotion, because this feels like a cheat code that learners often ignore. David points out that you shouldn't just be straining to hear the consonants and vowels. You have to actively listen to the emotional resonance of the voice.
Right.
He gives a great example. I really don't want to go. When a native speaker stretches out that word, really, elongating the vowel and dropping the pitch, it conveys an immense amount of feeling.
What David is highlighting is the power of prosody, the rhythm, stress, and intonation of speech. In linguistics, we talk about the fundamental frequency of a voice. Tone and pitch carry immense informational weight.
They really do.
In many high-context situations, they actually carry more semantic weight than the actual vocabulary being used.
Think about sarcasm. You can say, oh, great. And depending on the pitch, it either means you are thrilled or you are completely devastated.
Exactly. And from a decoding perspective, if you completely miss the rapid-fire words, don't want to go, but you clearly hear the heavy, exhausted sigh and the stretched negative descending pitch of, I really? Your right hemisphere, which processes emotional tone, has enough data to instantly grasp the core semantic message.
Even if you miss the actual words.
Yes. The speaker is unhappy, resistant, and negative. You caught the overarching meaning, even if you dropped the specific surrounding words.
It's like the speaker's emotional tone is using a bright yellow highlighter on the most critical part of the sentence, telling your brain, focus here. This is the point.
It really is.
And speaking of environmental clues, Emma brings up context as a massive predictor of vocabulary. She suggests that if you are a learner who loves cooking, for example, you should actively seek out and watch fast-paced, native-level cooking videos.
Which is smart.
Why? Because your brain already knows the overarching narrative and the specific vocabulary associated with the kitchen.
This brings us to a really beautiful concept in cognitive science known as predictive processing, or the Bayesian brain hypothesis.
The Bayesian brain hypothesis.
The human brain is not a passive receiver of information. It is a highly active, aggressive prediction engine. It is constantly obsessively guessing what is going to happen next based on statistical probabilities and environmental context.
So if you were watching a cooking video, your brain sees the cutting board, sees the knife, sees the onion, and it begins priming the neural networks for specific vocabulary words long before the chef even opens their mouth.
It's pulling up the files for chop, dice, boil, pan, salt.
Yes, the context radically lowers the cognitive threshold required for word recognition.
Because you subconsciously anticipate the vocabulary, it requires significantly less acoustic data from the speaker for your brain to confirm the word.
Oh, that makes sense.
If you hear someone in a kitchen standing over a boiling pot say, "Pass me the S," your brain's prediction engine fills in salt or spoon before they even articulate the final consonant. It doesn't even consider words like satellite or symphony.
That's amazing.
This builds incredible psychological confidence for a learner because it empirically proves to you that you can understand native speech when the context is securely locked in.
It narrows the universe of possible words down from 100,000 to about 50.
Exactly.
Okay, but I want to pose a scenario. What about when the context is locked in? You know, the vocabulary, but the person speaking sounds completely radically different from the pristine textbook audio files you learned from.
The accent problem.
The source material explicitly brings up the chaos of regional accents. American, British, Australian, South African, and even within the United States, a speaker from Brooklyn sounds like they are speaking a different dialect compared to someone from rural Texas.
This is a major hurdle, and Emma gives a fantastic, highly authentic example of a very informal, heavily accented American sentence.
Yes. She highlights the dropped consonants, specifically the G's. She presents the sentence, "Hey man, I'm heading out soon. You coming or nah?"
Right.
Heading instead of heading, coming instead of coming. And nah completely replacing no. But I have to be honest here. I want to push back on this instruction on behalf of our listeners.
Go for it.
Isn't it completely wildly overwhelming to ask a language learner who is already struggling with working memory and cognitive load to understand British, Australian, New York, and Texan accents when they're just desperately trying to master one single standard version of English?
It sounds like a lot.
It feels like asking someone learning to drive to simultaneously learn how to operate a tractor, a Formula One car, in an 18-wheeler.
It absolutely sounds overwhelming if you frame it that way, if you view it as trying to memorize 5 distinct contradictory rule books.
Right.
But that isn't the pedagogical goal Emma and David are aiming for. The goal isn't to ask you to perfectly emulate a Texan drawl or to memorize an entire dictionary of British Cockney rhyming slang. The underlying goal of exposing yourself to various accents is building something called acoustic flexibility.
Acoustic flexibility. Explain how that differs from just memorizing accents.
Think about it like training an artificial intelligence or a machine learning model. If you only ever train a voice recognition software on one single, perfectly articulated, monotonic news anchor, the neural network becomes what we call overfitted.
Overfitted.
It becomes rigidly locked to one single, correct acoustic template. The moment it encounters a speaker who drops a G, or draws out a vowel, or speaks with a slight lisp, the system completely crashes because the data doesn't perfectly match the rigid template.
It's too fragile.
Precisely. By deliberately exposing your ears to wide variations in pronunciation, different accents, different ages, different cadences, you are teaching your biological neural network to be tolerant of ambiguity.
You're stretching the system.
You are teaching your auditory cortex that a word can have a wide variety of phonetic signatures and still map to the exact same semantic meaning.
You are stretching the ear's tolerance for deviation. You aren't trying to learn how to speak like you're from the Bronx. You are just inoculating your brain, preventing it from panicking and shutting down when it encounters a Bronx accent.
Exactly.
You're building a robust, resilient listening system that doesn't shatter into pieces when reality gets a little messy.
That is the exact mechanism. You are building resilience, which perfectly transitions into the final and perhaps most vital phase of Emma and David's methodology.
The immersion phase.
Because if you want to build that resilient system and get used to messy, high-speed English, you cannot do it in a sterile laboratory. You have to immerse yourself in the chaos. You have to surround yourself with the culture of the language.
And the Advanced Learning Lab transcript leans heavily into this, specifically regarding real-world slang and idiomatic expressions, the kind of language you actually hear buzzing in cafes, shouted across subway platforms, or used in text messages, not the formal, stilted dialogue in Chapter 4 of a grammar book.
Slang is where the true heartbeat of a language lives. It is the purest expression of cultural context and acoustic efficiency combining.
Emma and David give some incredibly common examples that prove how vital this is.
Yeah.
Instead of a native speaker saying the formal textbook phrase, "Let me get something to eat," you are almost always going to hear, "Let me grab a bite."
Grab a bite, yeah.
Or instead of the formal declaration, "I am going to leave now," the reality is, "I'm going to head out." These phrases aren't just spoken fast, they are completely idiomatic chunks.
Right.
If you fall into the translation trap here, you are doomed. You literally cannot translate "grab a bite" word for word into most languages unless you are describing the physical act of violently snatching food out of the air with your teeth. It makes no logical sense.
It defies literal translation, which forces you to rely on the visualization and chunking techniques we discussed. But the larger question they pose is, how do you systematically expose yourself to this idiomatic, fast-paced language in a way that actually sticks in your long-term memory?
David reveals what he considers to be the ultimate secret weapon for this. He says the most powerful tool for ear training is music.
Music?
Pop songs, rap, rock, whatever you enjoy. His methodology is to find the lyrics, listen to the track once while reading along to anchor the meaning, and then, crucially, you sing along with the artist.
Which is a brilliant piece of advice from a neurological standpoint. Music is, without exaggeration, the ultimate cheat code for language acquisition.
I love that phrase, but let's break down the mechanics of it. I want to theorize here. I imagine music is so effective because the beat of the song acts as a strict, unforgiving metronome.
That's a huge part of it.
In a normal conversation, if I get confused, I can pause, I can stutter, I can ask the person to slow down, or I can quietly translate word by word in my head while they wait. But when you are singing along to a pop song, the band does not stop playing just because your working memory is buffering.
No, it keeps going.
The tempo forces you forward. Is that what makes it a cheat code? The inescapable rhythm.
That is a massive part of it. It's a phenomenon called rhythmic entrainment. Your motor system naturally syncs with the external auditory beat.
Entrainment.
Music inherently forces all of the advanced elements we've discussed today. Pitch, intonation, emotion, and most importantly, connected speech upon the singer. As you pointed out, the beat does not wait for your translation software to load.
It's relentless.
It is physically impossible to sing a fast-paced, modern pop song word by word, articulating every single consonant perfectly.
You literally have to use the acoustic shortcuts of connected speech just to fit the required syllables into the musical measure. If you don't squish the words, you fall off the beat.
Exactly. The melody and the tempo physically force your articulatory system to take the path of least resistance. It forces you to assimilate consonants, drop the extra sounds, and ride the rhythm.
That's so cool.
It subconsciously tricks your brain into utilizing native-level pacing and mouth choreography without you even realizing you are doing the hard work. Furthermore, as David notes, music is deeply tied to the emotional centers of the brain.
Oh, true. We attach so much emotion to our favorite songs.
Emotionally resonant material, a song you love, a melody that moves you, creates vastly stronger synaptic connections in the hippocampus than rote repetition of flashcards. You remember the slang, gonna head out, because you associate it with the emotional high of the chorus?
So if we take everything we have unpacked today, the reduction of cognitive load through chunking, bypassing translation via vivid visualization, understanding the physical mechanics of connected speech, and writing the rhythm of the language, I want to put it all to the ultimate test.
Okay, let's do it.
At the very end of the Advanced Learning Lab, Emma provides one final, high-speed, real-world practice paragraph. It is a completely natural scenario, spoken at full, unyielding native speed. I'm going to read it, and let's dissect exactly how you, armed with these new cognitive tools, can effortlessly decode it.
I love a practical application. Hit me with it.
Here's the sentence, straight from the chaos of real life. We were supposed to meet at 7, but I got stuck in traffic and then couldn't find parking, so I ended up getting there almost an hour late.
All right, let's look at the pathology of how a beginner fails here and how our newly trained listener succeeds.
Okay, how does the beginner fail?
A beginner, trapped in the textbook mindset, hears that stream of audio and immediately tries to isolate and translate the word supposed. Their brain starts searching for the native equivalent of obligation.
Right.
By the time their processor resolves that single word, the acoustic wave has already crashed past traffic and is entering parking. They are hopelessly derailed.
Buffering.
But armed with our new tools, how do we process this acoustic data stream? First, we apply chunking.
The suitcases.
The native speaker does not articulate "got stuck in traffic" as 4 independent dictionary entries. They expel it as one fluid, rapid block of sound, "got stuck in traffic."
It functions as a single noun, meaning delayed by cars, and immediately upon hearing that chunk, we deploy visualization.
Right.
When I hear "got stuck in traffic," I am absolutely not parsing the complex grammar of the passive voice or analyzing the preposition in. I am instantly, vividly picturing a long, endless line of glowing red brake lights on a congested highway. Boom! The semantic meaning is established in milliseconds in my visual cortex, bypassing the translation trap entirely.
It's instantaneous. Then we have to navigate the physical reality of connected speech. Notice how the phrase "supposed to" naturally blends together in the vocal tract.
Supposeta.
You do not hear a hard, distinct D followed by a harsh, aspirated T. It requires too much effort. It blends into one continuous, softer sound, supposeta.
Yeah.
And the phrase "meet at 7" becomes acoustically linked as "meet at 7."
Meet a 7.
Yeah.
The hard T in meet becomes an alveolar tap-a-soft D sound because the tongue is just briefly bouncing off the roof of the mouth as it rushes toward the vowel in at. It is purely acoustically efficient.
Exactly.
And if we string it all together, the entire complex narrative isn't a grammar test. It is just a sequence of highly vivid mental images.
A move.
You see someone checking a wristwatch at 7:0. You see the gridlock cars on the highway. You see a car frantically circling a crowded parking lot looking for a space. And finally, you see someone running up to a friend, out of breath and apologetic.
That's brilliant.
If you simply sit back and watch that movie play out in your head, you understand the holistic meaning of the sentence perfectly, even if your ear completely misses the preposition at or the conjunction and then.
You capture the signal and ignore the noise. But achieving that level of subconscious processing requires what Emma and David refer to as the philosophy of practice.
The philosophy of practice.
Rewiring your brain's auditory processing centers isn't a one-time overnight event. It requires fundamentally integrating English into the fabric of your daily life.
Right. It's about listening to a fast-paced deep dive like this while you are mindlessly doing the dishes or building out a pop song while you are folding laundry.
Making it normal.
You have to stop isolating language learning as a punishing, miserable study subject where you chain yourself to a desk under a harsh fluorescent light for 3 hours. You have to let the language wash over you in your natural, messy environment.
It requires immense patience with yourself. It requires intentionality. And it requires setting those microscopic, achievable daily goals, like just 1 single minute of the rewind exercise, or 1 short session of shadowing a YouTube vlogger.
So what does this all mean for you, navigating this journey? Let's zoom out and recap the massive cognitive shift we've just mapped out.
The big shift.
We started by identifying the enemy, the translation trap, that deeply ingrained instinct to pause, buffer, and translate word for word, which guarantees you will be left standing on the platform.
We learned to stop fearing and start embracing the biological reality of connected speech.
Where what are you doing naturally evolves into what you're doing to save muscular energy.
We armed you with concrete physical tools to train your auditory cortex, shadowing to build that vital mouth-to-ear muscle memory, and the 1-minute rewind to build your neurological stamina and tolerance for ambiguity.
We use dictation to force our brains to acknowledge those invisible, dropped functional words. And we learn to massively reduce our cognitive load by chunking words into easy-to-carry suitcases of meaning.
And perhaps most profoundly, we learn to bypass the slow, modern linguistic translation centers entirely by feeding the data to our ancient visual cortex, using context as an active prediction engine, and finally embracing the beautiful, chaotic reality of regional accents and street-level slang.
The ultimate resounding takeaway from Emma and David's Advanced Learning Lab is a message of immense, scientifically backed encouragement.
It really is encouraging.
Fluency and the ability to comprehend that speeding bullet train is not some impossible mythical mountain reserved for linguistic geniuses. It is a mechanical process.
It's just mechanical.
Every single time you actively listen, every single time you attempt to shadow a messy sentence or rewind a confusing video, you are physically, biologically building stronger neural pathways in your brain. You're laying down myelin on those circuits. You're getting closer.
I think there is a really profound, almost philosophical final thought to ponder here, building on everything we've discussed about this supposedly messy language.
Ooh, leave us with something good.
If you are listening to this, I want you to take a moment and consider your own native language, the language you have spoken since childhood.
Okay, thinking about it.
Think deeply about how you actually speak it when you are relaxed, sitting around the dinner table with your closest friends or your family. You highly likely use these exact same messy shortcuts, these squished syllables, and these dropped consonant sounds when you speak it natively. You do not speak your own language like a perfectly formatted textbook either.
Oh, that is incredibly true. We all mumble, we blend our words, we drop entire syllables when we're comfortable at home. We just don't notice it because our brains are already perfectly calibrated to decode our own messiness.
Exactly. So if every single culture on Earth, regardless of the language family, naturally and inevitably degrades their rigid, pristine textbook grammar for the sake of speed, rhythm, and acoustic efficiency.
What does that tell us about how the human brain is universally wired?
Wow. It implies it's a feature, not a bug.
Perhaps this messy language we've spent so much time and anxiety struggling to decode isn't a mistake that needs to be fixed.
Perhaps it isn't a sign of laziness or a corruption of the written word.
Perhaps this chaotic, beautifully blended, high-speed speech is actually the ultimate sign of human biological efficiency. It is the literal sound of our brains prioritizing human connection, rhythm, and shared meaning over cold, rigid perfection.
Which means that the speeding train blowing past you on the platform, it isn't something to fear.
It isn't an aggressive source trying to run you over or make you feel inadequate. It's just human connection, moving at the natural speed of life. You just have to learn how to jump on.